You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have Lindsay Cameron on the show with me. She has an amazing new book. It's called Just One Look. And let me tell you what, when you get a book, and it's one of those books that just won't let you go. When you say, I'm just going to read a chapter and then I'll put the book down, and then the next thing you know, well, I can't just leave it at that. I've got to keep going. And the next thing you know, you look up and you're holding your finger halfway in the book because you don't want to lose your place, and half a day's gone already. Just One Look is absolutely one of those books, and it is one that you must purchase this summer. All that said, welcome to the show, Lindsay.
thanks so much for having me, and thank you for the kind words about the book.
Oh, you're so welcome, and it's absolutely true. Lindsay, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
That's such a great question. I was actually pretty young. I was probably in the second grade, and my sister was in the fourth grade, and I really wanted her to come outside and play with me, but she had homework. She had to write a short story. I was really eager to have her come play, so I had said, well, I'll write that short story for you. And I remember that I wrote a story about the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus trading places. And my sister loved the story and handed in the story to her teacher, who wrote a very nice note about what a great story it was. And I just realized that I loved that process. I loved the process of writing the story. I loved entertaining people with my words. And after that, I just always had a journal or a diary, and it just really became something that was part of my life.
So you're, that inclination to, oh, I'll write a story for you. Did that ever strike you as odd that would be kind of a default answer? That did you ever look back and say, I wonder why I was so confident that I could do that?
I mean, I don't know. I think when you're a younger child, you're just used to doing things for an older child, like just to get them to come and play with you. So I was like,
Right.
story? Yeah, great. I could do that.
Oh, that's so funny. Were there ever any people in your life, maybe a parent, maybe a teacher, who saw this gift in you, or the storytelling gene, if you want to look at it that way, and encouraged that?
I had a lot of great teachers who told me that that was a skill that I had and I should pursue something with that skill. But for me, it was, I mean, being an author felt like as big of a dream as being a professional baseball player or an astronaut. It just wasn't like a career choice that I thought that I could make.
Gotcha. Um, so you're a natural born storyteller, that this starts to come out. And do you remember when, even though it seems so kind of far-fetched that this would be something that you could do you remember, if there was ever a time where you said, maybe not right away, but one day I will write a novel, and whether it goes anywhere or not, I'm going to accomplish this one thing with my life?
That didn't come until much older. That was actually when I already had a career. I was working as a lawyer, and I knew that it was something I didn't want to do long term. And when I was there, I came up with the idea for my first book, and I just knew whether or not that book went anywhere, I just really wanted to write it. And I tried when I was working as a lawyer. to in any of my spare time to write, but when you're working in a corporate firm in New York, there is no spare time. And so eventually I had to leave that job because I just really wanted to write the book. I really wanted to at least try.
So, as someone who is a storyteller, what drew you to the law? I've met quite a number of writers who were lawyers at one time or still practice law while writing fiction. W- What drew you to the law?
Well, I think a lot of people who enjoy writing are drawn into law school. You're almost kind of funneled there because you're always told by teachers or professors that your papers are really well done. And so you look, where can I apply the skill of writing? And being a lawyer is one place to apply that skill.
Do you, when you're in that stage of your life, do you ever, um, look at that as a compromise of sorts? That even though, practicing law definitely um, can take advantage of good writing skills, and even storytelling, fiction writing can, not that lawyers write fiction, I'm not saying that, but but knowing how to engage someone and knowing how to tell a story surely comes in beneficial for a lawyer. But does it ever feel like a compromise?
I mean, it doesn't at the time because when it's a goal that you're working towards, when you're like, oh, I would like to go to law school, so I'm going to work really hard to get the grades to go to law school, it feels like it feels like an accomplishment. But for me, when I was doing it, it just didn't feel like a lifelong accomplishment. It didn't feel like something I wanted to stick with every day. And then when you're no longer enjoying it, then it does start to feel like a compromise. You're not doing what you'd like to be doing, you're doing what you've trained to do.
Gotcha. So your first book that you published, Big Law, um, was this the first book that you wrote?
It was the first book that I wrote. Yeah, it was the idea that I came up with at the firm, and left to write that book.
So tell me about how this idea came about. Did it begin with a character? Did you start imagining, um, the scenario in a law firm? What was the genesis? What was that germ that began the story?
It was definitely the setting that began the story because, like a lot of people, I would watch legal shows on TV or you would hear stories about lawyers, and they just weren't what the reality was. Like it just, was the Hollywood version. So when I was working at a large firm in New York, and it's just a really odd place to be and completely different than what you see on TV. And so there was one night when I was sitting at my desk and it was probably like 3 o'clock in the morning and I was still at work and I just ordered in food for 3 o'clock in the morning. And I just thought, this whole life here is nothing like you would see on TV. And it's actually really crazy. And somebody should write a book about this. And then I was thinking, well, wait, I should write a book about this. And right then, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, I grabbed a notebook and I just started scratching down all these notes, all these like funny scenarios that had happened in meetings or things like that. And I actually kept writing in that notebook probably for about 6 months. And I was always so worried somebody would find my notebook that I had all these notes in. And so I would bring it home every single day. And that notebook and all those notes is what eventually became Big Law.
Now, you can dream up, fascinating scenarios, hilarious ones, or even, edge of your seat scenarios. But until you develop a character to inhabit the setting and to live out these scenarios, we as readers don't have anything to latch onto. Where did the character of Mackenzie Corbett come in?
Um, with her, I would say that she's a little bit based off of me, but she's also based off of a lot of other young female lawyers who I came into contact with. She's kind of a compilation of a number of different people.
Gotcha. So, as when did you realize that this was, there are ideas and then there are like really good ideas, the ones that this is not going to leave me alone. I'm going to need to run this story idea out to see where it goes. Kind of what was the point where you realized that this was a really good idea?
With the first book or with
With
just
the
one
first
look?
book.
With
Yeah,
the first
with Big
book,
Law.
with Big Law, it was really that the process of writing in the notebook. The fact that it wouldn't leave me for like a good 6 months, and it wasn't even that I had started to sit down and write it. It was just I thought there's so much material here. Like I just felt like it was it was a book that was writing itself, although in the end it did not write itself. But when I was taking the notes, it felt like it was.
That's such a good feeling when it feels like you're just grabbing it out of the ether, like the story's
Hmm.
alive and it's your job to chase it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
So then you finished the book. How did when you had a finished story in your hand and maybe had done some revision and felt good about it, for yourself? How did you then go about finding its place in the world and finding publishing and agent and all that stuff?
Well, I actually ended up getting a little bit lucky because I wrote that book in secret. Like I didn't tell anybody I was writing that. My husband knew, but even close friends didn't even know I was doing it. And mostly because I just wasn't sure it was going to go anywhere and it was just something personally that I wanted to do. But once I finished with the book and I felt like this is something that could go somewhere, um, I actually had a friend who was a writer and she had a literary agent. So I said to her, I haven't told you this, but I wrote this book. And she had also worked with me at the same firm. So she was very excited about the book. And she was just said, let me send this to my agent. And she sent it to my agent or to her agent. And that agent also used to work at a large law firm. So she read it and just really understood what the book was about and where I wanted to go with it. And so I signed with her and we worked on the book together.
So then when the book is published and it finds itself into the hands of lots of readers and then you're faced with that terrifying prospect for a lot of people of now what do I follow it up with? The old um second book dilemma that a lot of people find themselves in, and just one look definitely doesn't feel like a book that came out of that um that second novel place that a lot of people find themselves in. It is so fresh and so exciting. Where did the idea for this next book come from?
Well, I actually had come up with the germ of the idea um, even before Big Law. There was an incident that happened at my firm um, that I just found really intriguing, which was we had a group of temps in the firm who were reviewing correspondence for litigation involving one of the firm's clients, and it was actually a client that I did quite a bit of work for. And we came to find out that as a result of a glitch, a number of different people's inboxes were put in the review folder of the temps. And the IT people wouldn't tell us whose inboxes, who that had happened to. They only told us after the fact that this had been stopped. And so everybody was so paranoid of what whose was in there, what was read, and it just sort of struck me at the time how much information we have about ourselves and our email and what how we would feel if that got into the wrong hands. And so that that idea I came home and told my husband about at the time and we kind of talked about it, but then I sort of put it aside and didn't think about it for a long time. And so after Big Law, I wrote a different book. I wrote about a third of a different book, and then just it wasn't going anywhere. And I thought, no, this isn't my next book. And I was just kind of really grasping for another idea. And my husband said, well, what about that idea you had way back in the beginning about the temps in the email? And when he said it, I was like, yes, that is the book that I should be writing right now. And it also didn't write itself, but it felt like it would write itself.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web. Looking for a tool to help you visualize your story before the drafting begins? PlotPens is cloud-based and optimized for any device. There's nothing to download. From the new writer who isn't sure how to tell their story to the veteran who can increase their productivity dramatically, we've had experienced writers lay out a detailed structure for several novels in a series in a matter of a few days. The app takes you through 4 steps of the process: the concept or log line. Make sure you have a solid concept that you can keep coming back to throughout the process. The outline, 12 beats and 3 acts, each has a description of what should be happening with examples. The board, 40 cards. We take the 12 beats and add sub-beats to those, breaking it down even further and being very specific about what should go into each. These also have examples and descriptions. Right. We take those 40 cards and turn them into a to-do list. For a 50,000-word book, it's about 2 cards per chapter roughly. We have a beautiful editor built into the app. You can export your manuscript to a PDF anytime with the click of a button. Let PlotPens help you visualize your writing project. Use code HANK10 to get 10% off PlotPens. PlotPens.com. So again, you've got this fantastic idea for a story, but you know, it really resonates in the character of Cassie Woodson. Where did Cassie come from, and how did you develop a character that, you know, that by the end of the book, and I'm trying to choose my words so I don't give too much of the book away, but by the end, we have a very different feeling of Cassie than when the book starts. But you know, you are very careful to make Cassie a character that is very easy to latch onto and to sort of befriend in a book friend kind of way. You know, you feel like you know Cassie, and it's easy to sympathize with her. How did you start crafting this character that you would use to take us on such a roller coaster ride?
Well, Cassie really evolved over my drafts. I had a number of different drafts, and she was probably pretty different in the first draft. In each draft, I would say she got a little bit, almost a little bit darker, like sort of things were not going well for Cassie with each new draft. But also her voice really came to me each time, how she would respond to things. Um, what was going on in her past and what was going on in her life just really came to me with each new draft. Probably if you compared Cassie from the first draft to what was in the book, it's a very different character. I think that happens for a lot of writers that in your first draft you're just really getting to know these people that you're writing about, and you make some mistakes of how they would handle certain things, but by the final draft I just felt like I knew this person like I knew myself. I knew how she would, what she would say, what she would think, how she would act.
So, from your personal experience of knowing that this actually happened in your law firm, where people were maybe possibly reading through um, emails that that belong to you, to then uh, thinking about how the scenario would work with a character like Forrest Watts and Cassie um, accidentally reading his emails and then kind of becoming obsessed with that. Um, where did the character of Forrest come from?
Well, Forrest is probably, I would say, a compilation of different people who I encountered at the firm. You know, sort of a pretty confident person, with a life that on the outside looks ideal. Um, at least to somebody like Cassie, it looks ideal. And he's probably just a compilation of different people who I encountered.
Gotcha. So it sounds like that you are the kind of writer that in your first draft you're really using that to get to know the characters and to lay out the plot and to you know get from point A to point Z. When you start your revision process, when that first draft is done, and okay, this is the journey of the characters. This is um, uh, I understand kind of the lay of the story. When you start revision, what are some of the things that you look for to tighten up or to maybe add more detail, add more suspense? Do you begin revision with a plan in mind, or do you just come to the story blank and just kind of see what needs fixing?
It's usually a little bit of a plan because usually what I think of the character and their backstory at the beginning of the book, by the time I'm writing the end of the book, I'm already thinking, okay, I've got to change that in the beginning because I've sort of learned more about them. I've learned more the direction that this book is going. So I'll keep a different notebook as I'm going along of things I already know that I need to go back and change. But I try not to go back and edit as I go. I'm trying just to get this draft down. And so I will keep a notebook that things, something has changed, like maybe something in their past is now doesn't exist or something like that. And so it's a little bit of a plan based on what I learned at the end of that draft. And so then I'll go back full another go through of the draft and change those things I knew I was going to change. But also by the time I reach the end of that revision, I usually have more stuff that I'm like, oh, okay, now I know all my characters even better. I have to go back and change this because they would never do that, or they would never think that, or just that kind of thing.
The character of Cassie has some personal issues. She's working as a temp because she was let go from her previous job. How did the character of Cassie grow in the telling of the story? And were there character traits that you added to her, after the fact in the revision maybe that helped to define her character more?
Yeah, I would say she'd always sort of had a tumble down the corporate ladder, which is why she was working as a temp. But I think that her just acute loneliness really evolved, because why would somebody be so struck by an email that they're coming across? They really have to have something in their life, something that they're seeking. And for Cassie, um, she's seeking to be loved, and it's something that we're all seeking, but she has this just desperate need for it because she doesn't feel it at home, and she doesn't feel it from a partner. She certainly isn't getting it from her job. And so she's just really seeking it, which is why she is so struck by this email from Forrest and his wife, and why she sees it as something that would be everything that she would want.
There are some pretty great twists and turns in the narrative. When you're in the revision process, do you start looking for places to misdirect readers, to can pull the rug out from under them when they least expect it? Do you have a process for kind of figuring out at what point in the story a twist or a turn is needed? How do you start thinking about that?
Well, I'm kind of a pantser, but I have a general overall plot. I kind of know how it's going to start and how it's going to finish, and then I've got to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And usually while I'm doing that, something as I'm writing the scene, I think, oh, I can stick something else in here, which is, kind of a twist or maybe a red herring, who knows. Um, and that just sort of comes along with that process.
After publishing Big Law, was there any feedback that you got on your first book that then maybe informed or changed uh, anything when you're writing the second book? Did any? I guess what I'm asking is any feedback from readers, from editors, from whomever. Um, was that helpful, or ultimately did you have to put away all of the feedback that you got on your writing to delve into this book?
Well, Big Law is a slightly different genre. It's more women's fiction. But when I was writing it, my agent at the time had said, I think we should make the pacing more in line with a thriller. And I actually hadn't really read any thrillers at the time. And so I went to the bookstore and got, you know, 10 different thrillers, because I needed to kind of figure out what she was talking about with this, to really study what she meant by the pacing of a thriller. And when I was reading these books, I just fell in love with the genre. I loved the pacing, I loved tension, I loved just, that feeling that you have to turn the pages. And it was too late in my current book to switch it to a thriller. But I thought, the next book I write, I'm going to be writing a thriller, a suspense book. Um, and so I would say that process really made it so I thought I enjoyed writing women's fiction, but now I feel like thriller is my genre.
That blows me away that you are not a thriller fan from the beginning, because this feels like someone that's very intimate with the genre, and that you get the feeling that you're writing out of a love for the genre, which you obviously are. But I'm amazed that you came to the genre at the point that you did. That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, it is out of a love for the genre, because I did end up loving it, but you're right with that, it's not like a lifelong love. But what I ended up doing was just really studying it, like I would read a certain book and then love how it was paced. And so, the first time I would read it is purely for pleasure. And then the next time was really studying, like, when did they put in the twist? When did they have it slow paced? And then when did the pace pick up? It was more almost like a textbook for me the second time around.
What were some of the thrillers that you loved?
Uh, I loved Caroline Kepnes's You.
Oh yeah.
that one just really blew me away. Something completely different. I think, like every person who was coming to thrillers at that time, I loved Gone Girl. But I also loved some of the older stuff. I loved like Patricia Highsmith stuff and Stephen King. So many of the people were just, masters of that genre.
That's amazing.
Well, Just One Look is available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, you can grab it in Kindle edition or hardcover. It's also an audiobook. Have you listened to the audiobook yet, Lindsay?
I haven't. I've listened to a clip of the narrator, who I actually got to select from. The producer sent me over like a group of 6 different narrators, each reading a clip from Just One Look. And I love the narrator I selected. I think she really embodies Cassie, and I think she'll do a great job.
Well, after reading the arc of this, I can't wait to get the audio of it. I think it's going to be a fantastic experience. We're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode. No matter which format you like to read in, you can grab it today when you're hearing this, or go to your local bookstore and support local bookstores. Lindsay, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
Well, they can find me at lindsayjcameron.com. I'm also on Instagram at Lindsay Cameron Author, and I would love to connect with readers there.
Excellent. We'll put links to that in the show notes. Lindsay, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much, Hank, for having me.
Wargate Books presents Hit and Fade, Forgotten Ruin, Book 2, by Jason Anspach and Nick Cole, narrated for you by Christopher Ryan Grant. Chapter 1. The army of the dead walked straight into our ambush east of Fortress Hawthorne. That's what the FOB is called now, Fortress Hawthorne. Despite it being officially known as Forward Operating Base Hawthorne, as was originally intended when the 50 detachments of various special operations groups came forward through time from Area 51. A one-way mission to save Western civilization from a rampaging nanoplague destroying the very fabric of said civilization. Apparently, we overshot the temporal insertion point and stuck the landing. Sorta. About 10,000 years too late. Said civilization is now basically something straight out of Tolkien or Dungeons and Dragons, which we've all now gotten a lot more familiar with thanks to our resident expert and fledgling hedge wizard, the infamous PFC Kennedy. But the Rangers just call it the FOB. The first of our explosives to ruin the leading elements of the army of the dead advancing on us, Claymore Mines, the recaptured forge back at Hawthorne, had cranked out in the weeks after we'd retaken it from King Triton, were fired by Ranger Sergeant Kang down there with the scouts and Captain Knifehand's assaulters. It was close to midnight when the front rank of bony warriors, carrying rotting shields and spears, eyes glowing malevolently in the deep night mist, advanced into our ambush, only to get ruined by the daisy-chained claymores' sudden eruption. Above us, a cloud-shrouded moon cast a wan yellow light over the battlefield. The night was hot, and spring was coming on full now. The pilots who'd gotten us here in the grounded C-17 back at Ranger Alamo, using their meteorology skills, had guessed it was going to be a long, hot summer ahead of us, and an early one at that. But there was a cold shiver in the dark on your exposed skin that you couldn't quite explain when you saw the dead advancing rank after rank. The bone warriors, carrying spear and shield, other darker creatures barely seen. The lower areas of the earth were graveyard cool and misty, so maybe that was it. Still, the brutal, unrelenting cold of our almost last stand back at Ranger Alamo was gone now. But not the horrors. There wasn't a night that some ranger didn't wake up out of a tormented sleep, breathing heavy, sidearms scanning the dark and looking for orcs and ogres to ventilate. I was sweating in the hour leading up to the attack, despite the night and the mist. Kurtz had us humping hard to get the 240 and all its ammo up to the top of a small hill that overlooked the area where we'd channel the advancing echelons of the Army of the Dead into further fun and games the Rangers had planned at a bend in a riverbed. If the approaching Army of the Dead continued on their current course track, they'd enter it for a brief period. It was decided by the captain we'd kill them there. And I was sweating. Not because of fear. No, not at all. "Firing," whispered Sergeant Kang over the comm as he detonated the mines. And 8 daisy-chained claymores spat thousands of steel balls all across the front line of what even I was still finding it hard to believe I was seeing through my night vision device. Skeletons. Warrior skeletons. Ancient warriors like something out of the Bronze or Iron Ages. Worked breastplates of molded plate or rotting scales. Green and tarnished, stamped with the markings of fabled armies fallen in battles long, long ago. Leather cuirasses on some, rotting boots, helms with broken horns, missing teeth, tattered leather kilts, beads and charms dangling from bone wrists, enigmatic holy signs and primal torques black with grave dirt, or from a funeral pyre long ago on some forgotten battlefield far from here, draped about the spine where the throat should be, where it rises to connect to a bone-white skull that seems filled with malevolent purpose and diabolical intelligence, malignantly so. Walking skeletons like something out of a Ray Harryhausen clay model Sinbad epic from the 1960s. Above, the sliver of moon gave enough light to strengthen our NVGs, making the night vision devices perform exceptionally well as we sprang our trap and watched the advancing elements get rocked by our initial high-explosive opening bid in the game we were about to play. The air was still and hot in the moments before the fight began as we lay there in the tall, sharp grass, waiting for it all to go down. I was thinking a hot cup of coffee would be nice about now, except my canteen only had cold coffee I'd brewed during the long, silent, and windy afternoon of preparation. Still, I was happy knowing I had some, rather than none.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started.